Oh, welcome. We are live. Yes, we are live on the Right Way Business Growth Discussions. Great to have you again on another really quite exciting session, really. Thought-provoking as well. But we got two tremendous guests to help us really navigate our way through this discussion about personal branding, company branding. What's the difference? Is there any difference? What should we do as business leaders? And so there's a whole host of things that we're going to be talking about today. So great to have you on board. Have a pen and paper with you. Please also at the same time, we are live across all the social media platforms, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, something else as well, YouTube. Oh yeah, of course, YouTube. And we're live across all those platforms. So please, if you use the chat, if there's any questions from the guests that you want to use the chat function in any of those platforms, and they will come straight to us directly. So love to have your questions. We may talk about them probably at the very end, or maybe if they're relevant within the discussion that we will have. So just to give you an opportunity of sort of direction of travel today. First of all, I'm going to do some introductions, and then after that, clearly we're going to have some discussions around the whole subject, and then after that, we're going to be doing some Q&As as well. But like I said, we probably will try and do some Q&As within the discussion as well, if appropriate as well. So rather than just doing more of that, let me just introduce you to some of our key guests anyway. So first of all, ladies first, of course. And I'm going to introduce you to Jane, and welcome, Jane. I hope you can hear us okay.
Yeah, great to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Great. Okay, well, Jane is the founder of the Smart Connector, a boutique business growth and brand marketing consultancy that offers proven systems to build your authority and income online. And she has over 20 years of experience as managing director, brand developer, and creator of several exciting and highly profitable businesses and projects. And one of her passions and greatest passion she says her greatest passion, but I'm sure there's many other passions, but one of her greatest passion is helping consultants and service-based business owners achieve the rapid, sustainable growth they deserve. And her mission really is to help you create integrated, turnkey client attraction systems. Just managed to get that one right. That accelerate your income, impact, and reach while saving you hours of valuable time each day. So I'll obviously give you Jane's details at the end, but anyway, thank you, Jane, for coming on today. I really appreciate you spending your valuable time on that. Thank you.
Great to be here.
And without ado, many of you probably will know Dan Mordob, and you know, I hope you can hear us okay, Dan.
Yeah, all good. Can you hear me?
Excellent. Right. So Dan is a multi-award-winning entrepreneur, has worked with some of the world's largest brands in delivering game-changing campaigns and content through his agency, Wonderful. And Dan has spearheaded Wonderful into being a leading digital creative agency, recognized as number 11, should be a little bit more higher, I think, Dan, in the UK for client satisfaction in the 2015 Drum Design Agency Census. Former Kent Invicta Entrepreneur of the Year, Dan's relentless passion for helping brands to deliver better results through the fusion of creativity and technology enables him to input at board level right through to market delivery. And Dan has developed strategies for global brands in leisure, tourism, retail, luxury brands, finance, construction, and government. And also in his spare time, don't know where you find the time, man. Dan is a mentor and advisor to many of London's tech incubators and is a regular keynote speaker on digital technology, innovation, and business growth platforms. And something that's dear to my heart as well in terms of outside activity. He's a founder of the Wonderful Foundation, a not-for-profit organization that supports sustainability and growth of community projects globally. So thank you, Dan, for again, I know you just dashed out of a meeting to join us. So I really appreciate you taking the time to see
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
No worries. All right. So like I said, direction travel, we'll be going for an hour. Please use the chat to pick up any questions on the end. But before we get started as well, I just wanted to sort of set the scene for what I mean by the impact of personal and company branding on business growth. And obviously everybody knows about company branding in that respect, but personal brand is a bit of a funny one. So let me just really sort of just highlight what I think in terms of some definition around personal branding. I've said here on this little side that personal branding is a process of defining and promoting what you stand for as an individual. And your personal brand is a culmination of the experiences, skills, and values that differentiate you. So hopefully that sets the scene really for our questions today, and within our guest speakers and experts that we have on the show today as well. So it's been an interesting thing. I think, the pandemic really has helped to really just accelerate this. But to be fair, personal branding is not new. But why do you think today, folks, has it become so important for business growth? And Jane, you want to just kick off?
Yeah, sure. Well, obviously, it's all to do with the rise of the internet, right? Because what that means is that there's a lot more transparency than there was, let's just say, pre-internet. At that particular time, nobody really cared who ran businesses. People didn't have the luxury of being able to choose whether the values of the business that they were buying into or the individuals behind those businesses aligned with their own values. And I think that is the thing that's changed. And of course, what happened over the pandemic is that the rate of change accelerated exponentially, and people got used to just this whole thing of browsing before they buy. So I think this is relevant to you if you are, let's just say, a buyer of services or brands or anything like that. But it is also had very far-reaching implications for things like, any stakeholders, employees, investors. Really, it goes a very, very long way. People today want to know not just what the business is all about, but they want to know who the people behind the business are all about. And I think that's basically sums it up for me.
Yeah, interesting. And Dan, any more thoughts that you have on that one?
Yeah, I agree with everything Jane's saying. I also think that with the sort of, rise of the internet, there's obviously channel strategies have become really, really key. So personal brand, a lot of people naturally think about social media, but I also think that another layer to that is staff and customers' expectations have changed. So personal branding to me is not just the kind of external, what we say on LinkedIn, it's the internal, how we show up at work as leaders, as managers, whatever our positions might be. And actually there's a real kind of generational shift as well, whereas I think people don't just care, care how much you know, they want to know how much you care. They want to really see who you are as an individual, as a leader, as a manager. What is it you stand for? What's that culture that you're bringing? And I think that kind of change in expectations around company culture, around how we treat each other, around how we work together, not just only from the practical perspective of lots more things being in a virtual environment or a hybrid environment, but actually, we don't just come to work to work. We come to work because we care, and we care about the company and the values and the people that we work with. So I think there's a shift in expectations that means that your personal brand has become much more prevalent. You're not just hiding behind a manual or hiding behind the corporate handbook, but actually it's people working with people internally. And that's just the internal piece, let alone the external piece that we quite often think about. So I think there's some things that have shifted over the last few years that have really lent to the rise of personal branding, becoming much more prominent in people's sort of psyche and expectations.
It's quite interesting, in fact. Just taking that bit about the whole shift in the generation. I mean, we've got certainly a change in terms of people that we employ. Obviously, the generations X and Generation Z are coming through the portals of our businesses, and certainly for me, I've seen the expectations. They are more wanting to have this element of purpose. They don't want to just turn up for work for a paycheck. There's a little bit more. So just talk about that in terms of how that personal branding impacts on how they view companies and how they review the leaders of those companies.
I have.
Dan, you want to kick it up?
Sorry?
Yeah, sorry, Jane, go.
Well, I was going to say I have 3 children who are all well, actually, the oldest and the youngest are in employment. The middle one has her own business. But I've seen this at first hand with them and their friends, and they would far rather, and I know this for a fact, they would far rather align with a business whose values that they resonate with, and they would not expect them to pay as much to hire them as and to retain them as a company that they didn't respect in the same way. So it's very, very important, this whole issue of values and obviously personal brand. I know, for example, my daughter, she works for customer services for Soho House. She thoroughly researched the CEO, Nick Jones, and listened to all the podcast interviews that he'd done before she decided that she wanted to work for that business.
Yeah.
It's just interesting because I don't think that would have happened, say, 20 years ago.
I certainly didn't do that. I certainly did that. Dan?
Yeah, that's right. And again, just picking up on what Jane said there, so for me, personal brand around who I am is had to become much more transparent, much more, there's got to be delivered with a level of kind of follow through. So not just saying something corporately, but actually delivering on it. And I think, a brand is not, so it's not what you say, it's what you do, it's how you behave, it's the culture that you breed. So, for example, within the agency space at the moment, we're going through the process of becoming B Corp certified because, for me, I really believe that business is about profit, but so much more than just profit.
Yeah.
It's how you utilize it, it's how you treat people, it's the impact you have on your supply chain, the impact you have in the wider environment. So I've been having to live that and embody that and build a culture around that for the last 2-3 years because B Corp is a great process to go through, but it's just a process. At the end of the day, it's the culture and the values and the behaviors that go behind that process that are actually meaningful to our staff. So for me, it's been around last sort of few years, it's been around that shift from just the corporate mindset and approach to branding to actually bringing who I am to work. And also therefore helping my staff to find out who they are. How do they align with those values? What do they care about the environment? What is it? What are they passionate about? What motivates them internally? And that to me has been a really exciting part of the journey around personal brand. It's not just the individual leader, it's actually the staff as well, because they're bringing who they are to work as well. They want to bring their passions, their giftings, their talents into the workplace. So actually, I believe that personal branding is more than just the leader showing up and doing something on social media. It's actually about being able to empower those from within as well. So, and actually helping them to whether brand's the right phrase, but actually helping our team members to actually understand who they are as people and being able to align the two together, align the corporate brand with people's values, vision, culture, behaviors, and bring them together. And I think you end up with quite an exciting organization.
Just talk to us briefly about the B Corp setup. I'm very, very brief. I'm conscious that I don't want us to take over the discussion around personal branding, but it's certainly integrated in terms of personal branding as well. So very briefly, Dan, just speak to that.
Yeah, well, I think so. Taking a step back, we, as you mentioned up top, we have the wonderful foundation, which is we've always put a portion of our sort of time, talent, and treasure into the foundation, which has been a huge part of my own personal brand, my own values. It's been around helping others. So we help community projects in the UK, in Malawi, Kenya, Sri Lanka, India, and we're helping sort of community projects to become more sustainable. So we help them to understand how to build out sustainability criteria around their projects. But so not just finance, the finance is part of it. It's helping them to employ people well. It's helping them to see projects through to completion, so on and so forth. Can't go into that now. Would love to talk more about it. So the foundation has always been something that I've been passionate about. The leaders of the business have been passionate about. But you can't place that expectation on your staff members, but you can constantly communicate your values and what is it we're doing, what is it we're passionate about. So we then give staff some extra time off for volunteering. We ask them what projects they're passionate about. We give them the opportunity to do fundraising for some of the projects. So, for example, we've just done a big fundraising project to plant some rice seeds in fields in Sri Lanka, and we've just helped to plant 8 acres of rice, an acre per community project. So we've got 8 community projects. And then we're helping to see that, sort of not only the rice to obviously, to bear fruit, to come forth, but also to create micro employment in those different areas as well. So, that really aligns with B Corp. So when we looked at B Corp, it's all about measuring the triple bottom line of people, planet, profit. So, there was a whole alignment piece there and a whole bunch of other criteria in terms of how we treat our staff, how we work with our supply chain, how we measure our carbon footprint, so on and so forth. So when we looked at what the B Corp framework is and we looked at what we do as an agency, it kind of makes sense. It's a lot of work. It's a big process. We're in the verification stage at the moment. So all the evidence gathering, all of the paperwork, all of the policies, all of that's been uploaded currently, and we're getting questions on it all. So it's a really in-depth process, but really sort of meaningful.
No, very good. And, it's quite interesting how the shift has happened in terms of organizations. And, coming back to this sort of, personal branding element and in terms of being as important as well, the big question for everybody is that I have not got time for any of this rubbish. I don't even know how to work Facebook, let alone, wanting to promote myself on TikTok or Instagram or whatever it is. Do people have to, what do people have to do even just to recognize? I think it's this, how can I put it? How can you sell the business case of personal branding to many of the folk that are on this call and others as well, in terms of business leaders? Why should they even touch personal brand if it's not going to impact the bottom line? I'm doing what I'm doing it pretty well. What's the point?
Well, I mean, if I can answer that,
sure.
Wayne, I mean, this idea that brand is the fluffy stuff that doesn't impact the bottom line, and particularly personal brand, is just nonsense. I mean, it's just a ridiculous belief, because brand and, a good brand is proven to impact the bottom line. It's a long-term investment into your sustainable success. And there are many, many studies to prove how valuable brands are. So, I would say that that's just a kind of relatively sort of silly thing that people would say, because it is going to harm their business if they don't pay attention to this. If they just go about their lives and just think, well, it is the fluffy stuff. It doesn't really matter. What I do is just, face-to-face relationships is all I need. And nobody needs to actually find out about me on social media and find out what I stand for and what I care about and what I stand against and all of those important things and where I come from, then it is going to have an impact, and in a negative way, and they are going to fall behind their rivals who are doing that for sure.
It's quite interesting. In fact, before you cut in, Dan, I was at the new Apple headquarters in Battersea a few weeks back, And Tim Cook was there the day before. Bless him, I didn't get an opportunity to say hi anyway. But he had this sort of big town hall type discussion. He had two of his additional lieutenants with him from the executive team. One was on the marketing HR side, mainly HR. That's right, yeah. And the other one was on the sustainability part of it. So the whole complex is, carbon neutral, sustainable out across the piece in terms of food, in terms of well-being, all that type of stuff, or whatever it is. And afterwards, once he'd done his address, and some of the other guys had their chat as well, he said, "Look, come up if you want to chat and talk. Happy to answer any questions on a personal basis." And lo and behold, the biggest queue, as you well know, was with the sustainable lady. Nothing to do with Tim Cook. He had his little queue there, but everybody was queuing up to speak to the lady. Not only commending about the building, but also talking about the future in terms of what's Apple doing about making a difference to communities, the planet, all the rest, and blah blah blah. So again, it's interesting how there's a massive shift in people and their understanding around those sort of things as well. But coming back to just what you're saying, Jane, and I want Dan to just have a little chat on that. People, as I said, the people understand the importance of branding as a company branding, but they don't really understand their own impact to augment that brand. And I don't want you to just answer that aspect of personal branding, Dan.
Yeah, well, I think a couple of things there. Just picking up on what you guys have been saying, is one is that if you're the leader of an organization, if you're the CEO, MD, or in a kind of leadership position, you've got the organizational brand values, right? So you say, well, we're all about collaboration, we're all about this, that, and the other, whatever your values are. But how's that being lived out through you as a leader? Because that's where personal brand needs to really meet the corporate brand piece. So, you can kind of say, well, yeah, we believe these three things, we've got them on the wall and we've got them in the handbook, but then we behave in a completely different way. So the personal brand doesn't match the corporate brand. And so where there's that lack of alignment, then you're confusing staff, you're confusing customers, you're confusing supply chain. Because I thought this business is all about this, but then you're behaving like that. Yeah. So I think there's a real direct bottom line benefit there, because there's a real customer benefit, there's a real staff benefit, there's a real sort of multiple stakeholder benefit. So I think there's that one side of the personal brand aligning with the corporate brand. The second side of it is, well, if I'm going to, in a really competitive market, most of the markets we work with are in real competitive spaces. Why should I buy from your business over your business? Widget A versus widget B. You largely do something similar. Your pricing model is largely similar. Where's the real added value? Well, actually, personal brand is becoming one of those interesting spaces of added value. So, for example, if you listen to podcasts and you might listen to, say, someone like Stephen Bartlett, the Diary of a CEO. I listened to the CEO of Airbnb, Brian Chesky's podcast the other day with Stephen. I feel like I've got an inside understanding of Airbnb in a way that I never had before. Yeah. Now, that might make me more loyal. Next time I'm choosing to go and stay somewhere, I'm like, I've bought into something of that CEO that I hadn't bought into if I didn't listen to that podcast. So when I'm looking at a competitive search space and I'm looking at where am I going to take the good lady for a weekend away, then Airbnb, I've got some values in my mind. I've got a person that I can attribute those values to. 100%. Not just what I read on the website, but I've seen his face, I've listened to his audio, I've heard his story. So I think personal brand really does have very tangible commercial benefits if you get it right.
It's quite funny, in fact, people buy from people.
Yeah.
And I think, if there's any simple answer to that question in terms of why you should get involved, the amount of times that people have looked me up, whether it's on LinkedIn, on these type of forums, on whatever it is, to find out a little bit about me before they engage. It's amazing. Oh, how did you hear of us? Oh, I saw you on this podcast. I saw you on this video. I looked you up on LinkedIn and looked at all your posts. And so really, in the olden days, all you would do is you go to company's house and look at somebody's accounts, but you don't get a really sense of the culture, the values of the business, wherever it is. Now everything is splattered across everywhere. So people looking for, because ultimately, anyway, you say, as well, we're still risk averse as a people in terms of our buying habits. And we want to get some comfort that the people that we are buying from, etc., exude the same values and culture that we have. And I think, that's one aspect. And also we've talked about the attracting talent. If you want to attract the talent that fits into your culture, it's super, super important to do that. And I'm a big one about, fostering that culture. So let's take that stage further as well. And because I think, before I want to go to the next question, because again, I think this is really interesting. You talked about, Dan, in terms of your values and that you had to become more transparent as well as part of the process as well. That's good and bad in many respects in terms of, people say, I don't want to tell people what my whole life is about. What's the sort of flip side of that? What's it done to your people in terms of them thinking about you as a leader? And I'll ask the same question to Jane, but Dan first.
Yes, it's a great question. And I think, so we do an annual staff satisfaction survey, obviously once a year, being annual. And, we're asking them, and it's anonymous. We don't see who's written what. And it's not just a 0 to 10 score. There are open boxes where we're asking for improvements, and we're asking for improvements in leadership as well. So, they're the kind of questions that you would not, personally, I would not have asked 10 years ago. Yeah. So I think that, that sense of transparency means that as a leader within an organization, I've always got to be growing and developing myself. So my personal brand, the way that I live out the culture, the behaviors that I drive from within, have always got to change and grow and develop as staff expectations develop, as customer expectations develop. Yep. As you're trying to really find a genuine proposition and positioning for your organization. And as you said, Wayne, people buy from people. So I think, there's a real sense of like personal brand isn't just the nice message that you put on LinkedIn once a month, because I'm terrible at that stuff actually. It's actually the culture and behaviors that you're delivering and growing in, day out. Yeah. So I think, with that transparency comes a level of accountability, if you know, and I think that maybe that wasn't so much in corporate culture before, where you could have your brand values, you've got your brand book, but we behaved how we like. And I think modern business, business is shifting to, you've got your corporate manual, you've got your kind of values piece, but you can't behave how you like. You've got to live up to that culture. And I think, there's been particularly in my industry that I'm in, it's a very fluid market. The average tenure for marketing roles, I think, is now 14 months. So people are always looking for the next hustle. They're always looking for the next job, always looking for where they could go. Why should they stay? So I think it's, in some ways, in the hiring perspective, it's almost moved from, and I'm not saying it's altogether good, but it's almost moved from, why should I hire you, to sort of staff members going, why should I come work for you?
100%.
And personal brand becomes a big part of that.
No, totally. Jane.
Well, so, I have this philosophy. So I call myself the smart connector. And the reason for that is I believe that connection exists on 3 levels. It starts with connection to yourself. And what that means is a daily practice of self-awareness, self-reflection, actually keeping yourself accountable to yourself and scrutinizing your behaviors, and also your thought processes and patterns. Then after that, connection to others is basically the leadership stuff that you do day to day, perhaps with your team or your employees or whoever. And then connection to many is when you bring that to the world. So to me, I think I just want to back up what Dan was saying, which is, his comments have been absolutely fantastic. But you cannot show up to the world with a really powerful personal brand if you haven't done the work on yourself.
Yeah.
And if you don't do that work on an interpersonal level in terms of how you communicate to others. So it's all connected, but it does definitely start with that personal leadership, that self-awareness, and people who have a daily practice, let's just say, of checking in with themselves and actually holding themselves accountable. They're going to be better communicators, better leaders, And as a result, their personal brands are going to be more authentic, and they're going to be more liked and trusted as a person. It's inevitable.
No, it's interesting that you're saying about the accountability element, Jane. And you know me, I always do a lot of case studies on businesses here. And if you remember BrewDog, remember them?
Yeah.
And James Watt, and obviously they have a unique culture and values in terms of how they portray their organization and business. But it's quite interesting as well, because that same edginess, touching the ethical line, wherever it is, came through when a whole load of staff on social media put how this guy was, a pain in the backside, he was misogynist, he had some issues, blah, blah, blah. And you talk about accountability. I mean, to be fair, give him his due. He held his hand up and said, hey, I'm not perfect. I know how to deal with this, and I have to work on myself. And I think you're right. Sometimes people want to dive into this personal branding bit without the work. Work on yourself, because everything's exposed now.
Yeah.
Think about it. You can't hide anymore. People will put stuff on Glassdoor or social media to say how incredible or rubbish you are as a leader. So super important to do that work. That's a great point. I love that. So yeah, just to give everybody a heads up that you've got to really do an understanding of what you bring to the piece. And if you have a set of fluffy, as Dan says, fluffy elements around the back that you're not living out, it's not going to work. Not going to work at all.
Yeah.
So let's be practical, really, in the sense of everybody's they have a company branding in that respect, in terms of how they're portraying their business to the world. They're trying to augment their personal branding within that. Give us a few tips that organizations and individuals can do to try and really fuse the two together, because that's really key, really. Because if they're separate, then you're seen as a hypocrite and a charlatan. So how can people try and augment that? I'll start with you, Jane. You're the smart connector, so let's talk to the expert in that respect. I'm teasing you.
Yeah. So I think the most important thing is to not be vanilla, because it's all very good saying, well, I'm going to be a good person, I'm going to be a responsible person, I'm going to be a leader, and all of those wonderful things. But at the same time, you have to risk disapproval, and you have to risk being unpopular with the people who your brand or your business is not right for, because otherwise you really are not a leader, and you are not showing up as your best self, in a way. So
Yeah.
I always think it is very, very important to not shy away from being that, let's just say, that that truest version of yourself. And that is going to be, when anybody expresses who they really are as a person, there are going to be people who say that person isn't for me. And we have to be comfortable with that. And anybody who is developing their personal brand, as a leader of a business, or even just as a solopreneur, they have to really be willing to risk disapproval. So I think that's point number one, as it were.
But in essence, some of that is a result of individuals being clear that they can't be all things to all men, in the sense that they've got to really identify their how can I put it, their key client. And I think that forces people to say, okay, who am I speaking to? And I think I always try to tell organizations, what is the why? What distinguishes you? What makes you different from somebody else that customer's going to approach you? And Dan, the same question to you.
Yeah. Sorry.
Sorry, Jane.
I was just going to say that that is just very, very important, because what tends to happen, and I think as an effect of let's just say amplifying our personal brand, is we do tend to draw people to us who are like us.
Yeah.
So if basically you're not a very nice person, you will find yourself surrounded by not very nice people. If you're a really good person who is very values driven, those are the people that you'll attract. And so that's a good thing, isn't it? It's another benefit of building out a personal brand.
Okay, Dan.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And with some of the practicals of that. Obviously, a lot of that's lived out in behaviors. So when you come into personal brand side of things, like our proposition is around creating wonder, right? So we work with brands that are helping to create wonder within their organizations. That's brand strategy, digital products, so on and so forth, is what we deliver. But then for example, I've got like a LinkedIn newsletter, so which I put out every month or every 6 weeks. And within that newsletter, I'm always trying to communicate my journey with that, things that I see, things that I'm struggling with, things I don't understand, things that have created that, because otherwise it can, as James said earlier, it can be quite fluffy, a little bit ethereal. That creating wonder sounds amazing. What does it actually mean? So I'm on that journey as a leader, as someone that's leading client strategy, as someone that's leading the agency. So how am I living it out? Well, that I live that out primarily through my LinkedIn newsletter. So sort of really try and unpack this. If you go through the last few editions of the newsletter, you'll see me unpacking it. You'll see me unpacking creativity, the psychology around it. What does wonder mean? Where do we get it wrong? What drives me? So on and so forth. Because if I'm not embodying those values, it's just, again, it's the front of the website that says creating wonder, but what? It was just a message, So I think often the behaviors that within our personal brand really are building the culture, which then really aligns with the values, which then really should align with the vision and mission. So I think personal brand, the things that we do, the behaviors that we exhibit should really, flow bottom up and top down from an organizational perspective. So hopefully that gives you a practical example. But I really do kind of think that we live in a business culture where the behaviors that we exhibit on social media, internally, emails, meetings, all of that really are building brand every single day.
So apart from the sort of, doing the odd newsletter, whatever it is, what other practical elements that we could as business leaders do to enhance and augment our personal brand? And how can we, again, just I appreciate, the elements of, we have to live up to what our company brand is talking about, but what we can do practically, bearing in mind we're all time poor, time deficient, what can we do? Jane, you want to take that one up?
Yeah, well, I think that there is a lot of the time people think that they need to be able to do this themselves relatively effortlessly and easily. And yeah, I mean, look, we can all post on social media once a day if we dedicate half an hour or something like that to doing that. That's fine, but to really build a personal brand that has impact, it does help to have other people, whether it's an agency or whether you have a team that is helping you to do that, because none of us are great at everything.
Yeah.
And if we are naturally people who are leaders, we are the leaders of our organization, or we're comfortable in the limelight, and our skill is let's just say selling and being the front person of our business, we're unlikely to, at the same time, really enjoy being the back office person or the kind of technical crew, let's just say. So I'm just having come from a long line of agencies, and I was in agencies for many years. I'm not at the moment, but I really believe in agencies and the power of agencies and the power of having a team around you to actually help you build your brand for you. Even if you just start small with one VA or whatever, just I would say try not to do everything yourself, because then you're going to be departing from your zone of genius. And once you do that, it's going to be harder for you to achieve success as fast as you'd like.
Very wise words. Dan, you want to add to that?
I think that's a brilliant answer, and probably something I need to apply myself.
Yeah, I can see that.
I think it's something, so for me, just what do I do practically? Well, I think firstly is what I do internal, because if I can't do it internal, there's no point me sticking on LinkedIn. So I spend more of my time, actually, the relatively small amount of time I have to this, to try to deliver that internally. So the last 12, 18 months or 12 months, has been a lot of the B Corp stuff. So a lot of that personal brand side of things has been very much delivering that to our customers, through emails, through personalized emails that I've sent, through our decks, our presentation decks. Has been obviously internally to our staff, our supply chain. And then it's been focusing on sort of for me personally, focusing on trying to do one or two things quite well. So the LinkedIn newsletter is the example I gave. The flip side of it is I'm actually awful at posting on social channels. I'm really, really, people say to me, you did that. Why don't you stick that on LinkedIn? Why don't you put that on YouTube? I'm like, I don't do it. And I think there's probably a resource challenge there, but also I know my natural strengths are much better in one-to-one communication or in the room communication. My natural strengths aren't actually on social media personally. So I need to, resource that or need to look at what the strategy for that is.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of leaders might be in that boat, where you kind of, what you're about, what you can deliver, but you don't actually do it on social. So as James said, look at the resourcing for that and how to, and also where your audience is. I think it's very easy to fall into the trap of I need to be everywhere all the time. But where's your audience? Niche in and actually just double down on that would be my recommendation.
No, I like that. So that first step in terms of the internal, get your house in order, really work, as Jane says before, working yourself, making sure that you're really clear on terms of, matching your company brand values. And then the element of, if you haven't got anybody internally, then resource that. I was speaking to one of my clients, and one of her marketing people has done some LinkedIn stuff on his behalf using his, his login details as well. Whether LinkedIn shouldn't hear about that's not matter. But the point is, anyway, is that he's getting out there, and in that respect, I think also at the same time having an agency that you can just share some good news is not rocket science. Just share the odd snippet wherever. You don't have to be able to have a long war and peace narrative or newsletter to talk about what you're doing in the organization. Talk about the good things that you do. And I've got one client, and what he does, any work they do in electrical solar issues, he just puts the stuff up. Look what we're doing. Look what we've won and who we've done. So, it's and it doesn't take literally 15 seconds when you get used to it, or pass that to your colleague who can do that, or an agency who can do that. So there's little things that you can do to generate awareness of who you are and what you are doing as well. I do struggle with that personal bit. I know a lot of people go the extra mile in relation to talk about their personal life and some of the issues and the health issues, and I think it's I don't know what your thoughts on that. For me personally, I think there's elements of privacy I want to maintain in my life, and sensitivity to those around me as well at the same time. And I think so I don't want to probably some ideas around getting that balance right, because the last thing you want to do is very into, that's what people do normally see on Facebook and LinkedIn. They see a multitude of people just sharing their soul on the, I'm depressed today, please help me type of thing, So, Jane.
Well, I'm a cancer survivor, so I had breast cancer 12 years ago. And I do talk about this on social media because it's a very important part of my identity. And I really like to help people who are struggling through the cancer journey, particularly if they are entrepreneurs, because often they might not have the right insurances. The loss of their health might also mean the loss of their business because they haven't necessarily got sick pay and all of those kind of things. So behind the scenes, I do quite a lot of work to support cancer survivors, and that's the reason why I talk about that. Now, that's actually nothing to do with my business. It's just something that social media is a useful channel for me to do that.
Yeah.
And likewise, sometimes I'm a single parent. I've been a single parent. I have a unique and interesting journey because of my single parenthood.
Yeah.
So I think that for me personally, I'm happy to share all of those things. The one thing that I would not share is I'm having a terrible day today. Of course, we all have bad days. Oh, this went wrong and that went wrong and all of that. And the reason for that is because people like to be inspired. So I think when we tell
100%.
when we tell our personal story, it's always good if it can have a happy ending, right? Because we grew up with fairy tales. We always want to, be taken down and this is awful and how scary and how horrible that must have been. And then there's the happy ending, you see. So I have a happy ending because I'm a survivor of cancer and I never had a relapse, and I love to inspire people. and saying, no matter how bad it is, you know, I'm here for you. You're not alone, and there's good things are on their way. You know,
Yeah.
so that makes
It's that
people
resilience piece, isn't it, Jane? It's that
Pardon? What's that?
resilience. It's that resilience piece. You know,
Yeah.
you're saying if I can get through this personally, you can get through this through your business as well.
Yes, and I've always been that kind of a person. I love to champion the underdog. You know, always like from a child, I'm somebody that has always stood up for people who were not strong enough to stand up for themselves. So that is very much a part of me, and that's a side that I like to show on social media, if I can. So if it's when it comes to kind of personalizing, that's the way that I tend to do it.
Very good. I like that.
Brilliant. And I think, you know, with what Jane's sharing there, that's part of her authenticity, it's part of her story. But it's also, you know, she's very clear about the audience that she's speaking to. And I think that's brilliant. You know, it feels like she's got that kind of that golden triangle of, you know, story, of audience and your message. But I think, you know, for us, or for me personally, I'm often dealing with sort of CEOs or MDs of, you know, and the kind of content they want to see. They want to see me, I think, the way they tell me, is they want to see me chewing through business things and strategy things, not necessarily on social, my personal life. So you know, I've got to know my audience. So I'm trying to be authentic and transparent with the things that I'm working through when it comes to agency growth, when it comes to supporting clients, when it comes to understanding how to deliver wonder, all of those sorts of things. So it's not necessarily my personal story within that. Now, as Jane said, if I'm dealing with entrepreneurs or startups one to one, and they begin to talk about, you know, their own brand or their own journey within their business growth, then I'll absolutely reflect more of my journey, my story, where I've come from, how I've developed over the years. But actually, my personal brand on social is more around those other areas I mentioned because of the kind of clients that I'm dealing with.
Yep.
So I don't think it is one size fits all. I don't think it's like, if you're not bearing your soul on social media, therefore you haven't got a personal brand. I don't think it's that at all, you know. But the authenticity and the kind of the way that Jane's communicating to her audience is absolutely incredible. I couldn't speak into that. I'd have nothing to say. It'd be inauthentic for me to try and be a personal brand in that way. So I think, you know, we do. I mean, it sounds really obvious, but I think we actually have got to go back to what is our story, what is our message, but also who's it for, who are we actually talking to, you know, so that, you know, at the end of the day, you know, brands exist in the mind of the consumer. It exists in the mind of what your stakeholder, whoever they might be, is receiving from you and what they're believing from you. So I think there's still those sort of traditional brand mindsets that are needed to personal brands. It's not all of a sudden everyone goes out and bears their soul to everyone all the time. I think that's a little bit naive.
And it's quite funny, in fact, because some of us oldies, you know, and I'll just hold my hand up there in that respect, you know, we'll always look at, you know, Richard Branson and think, well, I can't do what he does, you know, because they think of personal branding as flying out of planes and, you know, and going to raves and all the rest, you know, type of thing. But I totally agree with you, Jane. And it's having things that, you know, you're passionate about, that allows you to tie that in with not only the company, but also with business as generally as well, because people do suffer cancer, people do suffer mental health as well. And if you're able to resonate with that and help people, like you said, inspire them, you know, through their day to be able to take that next step, then one, it always connects a connection with you and somebody's authentic around that. Somebody, you know, one of my clients, you know, he met another prospect, and the guy said, "You're the famous, you know, this X, Y, and Z, you know, person." And what are we talking about? I've seen you on YouTube, and I've seen you here, wherever it is, you know. And there's also that resonant connection as well, and it just helps to break the barrier of those relationships with your ideal clients and prospects, because they've already had some insight into you. You don't know them from Adam, but ultimately, you know, that first hurdle of connection is already gone in that respect. So the power of personal branding to do that is really, really cool. Good. I'm conscious of our time. Oh my gosh, look at it. Again, any questions you have, just slot in if you are listening here today. But ultimately, let me just finish off in relation to, I've got examples of organizations have utilize personal branding, and you've seen the real impact and benefit to their business. And I think I just want people to be inspired that, you know, that this stuff works. It's not just a hairy fairy thing. Jane, you want to just kick off that?
Well, I think the most famous example really is obviously Richard Branson and the Virgin brand. I mean, he is, I would say, he probably has the most powerful personal brand in the world.
Yeah, I agree.
I think what this kind of comes down to really is that his, I believe he described himself as a tie-loathing adventurer at some point. So he embodies the spirit that a lot of us aspire to, which is basically freedom-loving, fun. He's adventurous. There's a side to all of us that wants to be all of those things. And I think by standing for those kind of values, it's like, look, fun is important. Then I think he spoke very, very powerfully to everybody, really, who also aspires to have a good life and have an exciting business that also delivers a good life. So, you know, I think he has always been an inspiration to me. So, yeah, Richard Branson.
Dan?
I think a couple of examples. If you look at, say, the rise of someone like, say, Stephen Bartlett, who's come from, you know, a particular background and a particular kind of education and formative life, you know, formative years, and then goes into the agency space and creates something quite unique there, exits, but then utilizes his own journey, you know, through his podcasts, through different investments he makes, you know, now TV appearances. He's someone who's living out his journey in front of a very, very large audience.
Yeah.
And I think, he's a very sort of modern, fairly recent example of someone who's on that journey of discovery as a leader almost, but living it out to an audience, and who's got huge traction when it comes to personal brand. He's the voice piece and the mouthpiece of a whole generation in many ways of entrepreneurs. Another example I want to give, which is kind of twofold. One, because it's topical, and two, is because I've just finished reading his book, is Siya Kolisi, who's a South African rugby union captain, who obviously is a sporting example, but he is living out a personal brand, you know, from his own story that's impacting a nation. You know, he doesn't play rugby for the sake of playing rugby. He plays rugby to inspire the nation of South Africa and a particular people group within that nation. And just the inspiration that he is to so many people and so many different stakeholders is absolutely phenomenal. So he's an example to me of a brand that almost supersedes business, because it's about a bigger North Star, a bigger message. And so, you know, but the commercial impact of that, if we had some more time to undo a case study on it, the commercial impact, the way that he lives out his brand is phenomenal. And so I think that, you know, he to me has been a really clear example of someone who, not only when he's playing the game, but his interviews, his before and after the game, the way he sings the national anthem, the way that he works his foundation, the way that he works into communities, the way that he impacts, but his brand is really impacting whole communities and potentially a nation. So I think that's a really interesting example of personal brand.
No, 100%. And it's interesting how you talk about Stephen Bartlett as well. And I spent a little while with his business up in Manchester as well. And at the time they had 200 people.
Right.
And all of them were under 25. So I was really old. You know, it's just incredible average age. You know, it was like 24, 25, 200 people. But without exception, his personal branding attracted them to the organization. Him and Dominic, you know, McGregor there, you know, was really just spearheading something quite unique. And obviously he talks about, you know, quite candidly some of the pros and cons of the route that he's gone. And he's gone to the extreme, you know, really to the extreme of even documenting what he does every single day, you know, that sort of stuff. But he's just trying his best to sort of take that little piece of privacy, especially with, you know, his partner and kids and whatever, to, you know, to really just, you know, ensure that stays as best private as much as possible from some of the other stuff that he does. But you're right, Dan, it's fueled everything that he's done, all the organizations that he's invested in. The personal brand has been a large part of that, and also a large part of their success, because he's on board. It's given them that sort of boost, in terms of eyeballs on the organization. So, so one aspect, in terms of a smaller business, it's going to take time. It's not going to be like, overnight. It will take time to build presence around some of these platforms, whether it's newspaper, whether it's on TV, the odd, snippet on TV, whether it's on social media. It's going to take time, and just start, folks. Just start. I think that's really, really important. And like you said, Jane, if time poor aspect is an issue, then please reach out to an agency like Dan's, or even talk to Jane. She's very good at actually helping people through their personal branding on a one-to-one basis, able to help people through those challenges, to ensure that they can start to build their personal brand, and more importantly, attack their ideal clients. That's the bottom line. If you're doing a scattergun approach, it's not going to work. Focus on reaching out to those ideal clients and developing relationships with them, using your personal brand going forward as well. So, any last comments? I'm conscious of the time as well. Just want to leave a couple of sort of last comments with both of you around the whole subject. Clearly, we've seen that it can have massive impact on your business if you really do it right. But yeah, any last comments? Dan first, and then Jane to finish.
I think a really personal last comment and encouragement, I suppose, is not to stress and worry too much about the nuances of your post, or are people gonna hate you, or you're gonna lose friends or followers. I mean, obviously align it with your own values and culture, but I think just start, just do it, just do something, just engage. I think because otherwise you get this analysis paralysis. It's like, what if this doesn't work? What if they don't like it? What if I don't get that many likes? And then we get into that whole kind of sort of paralysis cycle. Just know who you are, know your culture and values. Find something great that's happened today or this week. Just post it. Put a picture. Put a comment on it. Just tag some people. Post it, and then just build from there. So I think one of the barriers to sort of personal brand sort of strategy is actually just starting. Just get on and do it.
No, 100%. And last word to you, Jane.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with what Dan said. But I also wanted to echo something that you just said, which is really about your target audience and about not scattergunning. So I think with any form of marketing, it's very important to know who your ideal audience actually is. And they may not be the clients that you're working for right now, but investing in any form of brand is an exercise for growth over the mid to long term. Yes, you will get some results in the short term, but for that reason, you need to be very clear about who you are trying to influence and what you are saying that will appeal to them. And that's why, I really enjoyed this conversation, what Dan said, what you said, Wayne. I mean, it's been a fantastic debate all round, but I do think it all starts with who are you aiming for? That is the most important thing. And that is something that we must never, ever forget.
Great.
Wise words. And thank you again, Jane. Really appreciate your time as well. And Dan as well. Busy people. If you want to reach out to them, you may take a screenshot of them, and I can also send you information if you reach out to me on LinkedIn. Remember, some of my stuff in my book, The 10 Commandments of Business Growth, that's on Kindle, Audible as well. You can have a look and see some of those things around, a whole piece around social media as well, which may help you as well on your journey. But please reach out to Dan. Please reach out to Jane. They'd love to help you as well. And just want to say thank you again. Really appreciate your time and efforts as well. Thank you, folks, for those who have joined in today. I know that probably a bit shy in saying any questions, but that's cool. That's all right. And but no, wish you a great afternoon. Thank you again, and best wishes as well on your journey for personal branding and growth in your company. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been
Thank-
great to be here. Thank you to Wayne and Dan.
Thank you.
Thank you.